Yep. So three broad areas in which Iran focuses: obviously sabotage and disruption. Really, this is generally very heavily linked to geopolitical developments, away largely strategically a way to retaliate. So in this instance, the Shamoon attack was really driven by the initial act of the Stuxnet worm, which was an Israeli-US operation that disrupted nuclear centrifuges, which again was a very sophisticated cyber attack. Took a bit of a while to work out what was going on, but once it was attributed, Iran then developed its own sort of sabotage disruption virus, Shamoon virus, with Saudi Aramco targeted as the economic linchpin of a major sort of US Gulf partner that was joining in US efforts to sort of pressure Tehran, then provided a fairly natural target. The consequence of this was pretty significant. I get the precise figures, but obviously effectively wiping out the computer systems of Saudi Aramco to the point where the government was unable to bill for oil it exported. In order to keep the flow going, it just let people have it for free. And the way around it in the end was for a lot of executives to get on planes to go to a lot of countries and buy up a load of hard drives and data cores in order to try to recreate the computer network from scratch. So it was very significant, and showed even then in 2012 some pretty significant capabilities on Iran's part. There've been further things that we less remarkably kind of sophisticated, but I think in 2016 there was a fairly major denial of service attack against US financial institutions, which again not so economically damaging to the same extent, but did show a broad ability to create significant disruption. Then election interference. Again, less sophisticated and less of a history compared to the Russians. However, nonetheless, increasingly interested in such activity. So again, similar to what Jemima discussed in its involvement in the US election 2020, a little bit like much of what Russia does. It wasn't necessarily about specifically promoting a candidate, even though there was a suggestion that Iran might have tried to weigh in specifically against Trump and in favor of Biden, given Biden's stance on the nuclear deal. It was more just about trying to undermine the public perceptions of democracy and spread and worsen pre-existing tensions. So I think one of the main things they did, or that was linked to Iran by US officials, was creation of sites effectively claiming that specific election officials were somehow corrupt or influencing the vote directly in terms of rejigging results and so forth in order to undermine the credibility of the election. There's also been some interesting reports lately that Iran is seeking through social media to try to push pro SNP narratives in the Scottish independence referendum, or Scottish independence referendum to come, should I say. I think there's probably an extent to which that's somewhat overstated, but it does seem, at the same time plausible that's the kind of thing that Iran would well, be interested in doing. And again, it's that quite low-cost way of trying to disrupt and undermine enemies. Just creating Facebook pages and promoting content. It's not overly sophisticated, but can bring significant benefits. And then lastly, and most significantly for Iran, is espionage and intellectual property theft. The Mabna Institute, which is a cyber agency which is very credibly and closely linked to the Revolutionary Guards. In 2018, the US sanctioned this group. I think 31 terabytes, an awful lot of information that was reportedly stolen. And the main target of that was Western universities, so specifically US, but also UK, European, Japanese, with some 8,000 academics had their past emails and systems compromised. So And again, the suggestion there really is that this was looking quite heavily at sort of tech transfer, and again speaks to that fact that Iran, by virtue of that sort of sanction situation it finds itself in, feels behind in those terms. And so getting hold of scientific information, as I'm sure particularly within the nuclear sphere, given its ambitions, is thus really key, and by a distance, I'd say the most central element of the Iranian cyber strategy is this espionage and this desire to increase the state's knowledge through these means.